Welcome back to Don't Leave with Mary Crocker Cook. And we will start with the classic attachment style that most people think of when they hear the word codependent. When I teach and write specifically about codependency, I define it in this way. The first part of the definition is that at its heart, codependency is a set of behaviors developed to manage the anxiety that comes when our primary attachments were formed with people who were inconsistent or unavailable in their response to us. We began looking at this part of the definition in our first videos. The second part of the definition is that our anxiety-based responses to life can include over-reactivity, image management, unrealistic beliefs about our limits, and attempts to control the reality of others to the point where we lose our boundaries, self-esteem, even our own reality. We will begin to address this part of the definition in this next set of shows as we look at our attachment styles and the behaviors that go with them. Finally, the third part of the definition is that ultimately codependency is a chronic stress disease, which can devastate our immune system and lead to systemic and even life-threatening illness. We will address this last part of the impact of codependency later in the series. Recovery requires that we address all three parts of this definition for long-term wellness. I want to give a caveat here that before we launch into our strategies, I want to acknowledge that we can do all of the strategies in some situations. In fact, theorist Dr. Patricia Creighton would suggest that we need all of these strategies depending on the situation we're in. So when thinking about your own approaches to forming attachments with others, you'll recognize yourself in most of them. However, your primary strategy will be the one you use when you're feeling the most threat to a significant relationship attachment. What strategies do you use when you're feeling the most distressed? Keep this in mind. So let's get back to our attachment strategies in the activating or anxious strategy style. I say this is the most commonly identified because it's often the most visible of the styles. In fact, being visible, it's often its saving grace because anxious behaviors are more easily spotted and addressed. The other strategies can be harder to identify. Again, regardless of the strategy, all of these strategies are codependent because at the heart of them is our inability to trust our attachment with others. We just act it out in different ways. When the availability of an attachment figure, caregiver, or adult partner is intermittent and unreliable, we remain in a state of distress and attachment insecurity. We are on high alert for signs they are distancing from us. And when we feel threatened, we use hyperactivating strategies. These strategies result in constant concern, hovering, efforts to solicit soothing for our distress. This includes strong attempts, clinging and controlling to obtain care, closeness, and affection. Individuals who use these hyperactivating strategies perceive ourselves as incompetent and helpless when attempts to connect don't work with our caregiver or partner. So we then develop an overdependence on them because we don't believe we can take care of ourselves. We get neurologically flooded with fight or flight anxiety the more we perceive threats of abandonment. We can't effectively regulate our own distress and begin to see ourselves as inadequately supported, insufficiently loved, vulnerable to uncontrollable threats, and improperly or unfairly treated. We might even begin to feel rage toward the unavailable person for never being there. This state of mind encourages anxiety, rumination, catastrophizing, jealousy, and envy. This can lead to increased efforts to capture a caregiver or relationship partner's attention and loyalty by acting seductive or coy or doing things we don't want to do, and attempts to force their attention by making demands expressing strong negative feelings, tantruming, smack-talking our perceived rivals, or breaking into their phone or email. Someone began a story this way once with me. So, I was on the roof of the apartment complex across the street. Right away, I knew this was going to be interesting. She continued, I was watching the driveway at my boyfriend's house to see if the skank's truck was there. I saw her drive in and I got in my truck to grab my bat. And I interrupted her and I said, and what were you thinking was going to happen? You were going to start swinging? And he would say, what was I thinking? I already have the most perfect girlfriend in the world. Come here, baby. Well, what really happened was she was arrested and she could see her skank's car still in the driveway as the popo carried her off. On the one hand, relying on the caregiver adult partner is awkward, uncomfortable, and sometimes annoying. But on the other hand, trying to take care of ourselves can feel dangerous or hopeless or just too hard. We do these behaviors in our adult relationships to protest temporary abandonment, real or imagined, because making noise may have recaptured a neglectful or self-preoccupied caregiver's attention as a kid. It is our working internal model. Because closeness and attention from the caregiver or partner, once we get it, is often not soothing, may even be punishing, we remain persistently anxious and angry in response to their occasional availability when we turn to them for security, and we stay vigilant for signs of their presence or their absence. Our confidence in ourselves to respond appropriately to threats and self-soothe did not develop adequately as a kid, as all of our coping mechanisms were developed to manage external threats to security. How they feel about us is the focus of our attention, not how we feel about them. I bet you can see how this could create a skewed relationship picker. Do they choose me? That's what matters. So we developed a skill for manipulating and forcing others to see and hear us to survive a preoccupied or inattentive caregiver. We needed these strategies then, and they sort of worked. We weren't eaten by wolves after all, so it's a survival success. Once you have this set of strategies, you'll always have them, and in some situations, you might need to use them in order to advocate for yourself. The problem is if you use them all the time. They're outdated and no longer helpful skills. In fact, they can blow your relationship. So you need additional skills to add to them. And that's why I'm here. So I will look forward to seeing you next time where we talk about avoidance strategies.